Hi, today I want to show you how you can create a Notion-like text block editor fully natively built in Wized and Webflow. And the wonderful thing is, as I edit anything in here, keep an eye out of the v.json data, it's going to update a JSON array with the data, with a new data structure that just was created as I did this edit. And it is going to give me a timestamp for that, and I'll be able to send this data back to my backend or store it somewhere else to then repopulate the latest edit the user did into the canvas or preloaded template or something like this. So it is really powerful. And for example, if I were to delete all the content in the canvas in here, like this, I could even have an action tied to populating template content into the canvas, or even populating this on page load as the initial template. So there's really a lot of powerful things that can be accomplished with this setup. So I'm super excited right now to walk you through all the details and how this works. So we're going to use something called Editor.js to accomplish this. It is an open source block style editor like Notion, but this is an open source version of it. So they have very extensive documentation right here, and they have a wonderful CDN from which you can get all that information and all their packages. So let's get started into Webflow. So we just have a custom component in Webflow, and we just give it an ID of Editor.js. This is everything we need to do in the Webflow canvas. Just a custom component, also important as a div block, and we're going to give it an ID of Editor.js. And that's it. And now we just need to add all the packages. And don't worry, there will be a complete clonable for the Webflow and the Wized in the description right below here. And we're just going to add all the packages we want to use from Editor.js, all their extensions, all their add-ons, like drag and drop and undo and all of that, because we also have drag and drop in here. Let's just drag that back up, and yeah. So we're going to load those packages in here as well. So first of all, before we're going to start, we're not going to define it as their documentation says as a const or as a var. Their documentation recommends us to do const editor.js, and then we're going to define the new editor with this setup in here. We're not going to do that because if we're going to define it as a const, it will just save it on the page, which makes it not as easy to access within our Wized setup as we would just do it as a Wized variable. So we're going to turn this into a Wized variable. So we're going to create a Wized variable called Editor.js, and we're going to set this as an empty object. And of course, we're going to populate that. So as the page starts loading, we have this action called load Editor.js that will create the Editor.js within the canvas, within the div block. So we have this action set to page starts loading. So the moment the page starts loading, we're going to initialize the Editor.js. So the setup is very simple. We just have this part in here in which we're going to define all the tools. And you can just add as many tools as you want into this object. It doesn't matter. It's just follow their documentation, and you'll be able to add those other tools in there as well. But the setup is very simple. There are the inline tools, and if you want to add an inline tool, so what an inline tool is, let me show you that. If I'm going to do heading, but it's a paragraph, I'll be, heading. So if I have a heading and I wanted to turn it into a heading, into a real heading, because it just was a paragraph, I could just use this inline toolbar to convert it to whatever I want, right? And this is what we're going to define into the inline toolbar in here. This is just an add-on. It's not needed. As you can see, we cannot turn it into a checklist, or we actually can. That's just their basic feature. But this is what the inline toolbar is providing. So we can turn anything we want and turn it into an accessible feature in like their tooltip feature. But we don't need it for everything. So yeah, let's just continue. So we have now the initialized Editor.js part. So we're going to create an Editor.js with empty data inside a Wized variable. So we're not going to do this as a const, or we're not going to do this as a var. We're doing v.editor.js. We're going to use Wized's internal variables, and we're going to run the function to create a new Editor.js instance. And we're going to define how this instance will look in here by giving it some configurations. So we're saying holder is Editor.js. So the holder will be already targeted to the div block, which we added with ID. So whatever the value of this div block is for the ID, this will be what you will need to put into the holder. For simplification purposes, we just called this Editor.js. So this is what the holder is for. It is where the Editor.js will be rendered within. And then we're just going to define the tools, which we did up here. We did this const main tools, and we defined the object. So we're going to do this in here as well. And you may ask yourself, why can't we just do a const for Editor.js as the documentation recommends, if that works for the tools? Now, the issue is if you want to call Editor.js into a different function, it will not work, or at least not properly without having to reload the whole editor and potentially losing some progress which you made. So what you just want to do is you just want to have this as a Wized variable so it can be accessed across multiple actions and multiple computed variables depending on how complex you want to build it or how simple you want to build it, because it simplifies potential complexities while doing it like this. So we're going to set the main tools, which we set up here, and we're now going to add some data into that. So we're going to add blocks. This is basically their main configuration for Editor.js. It is a block editor. So everything you see in this editor is a block. So this is a block, and if I'm going to add something new, this will be all considered as a block, right? Those are all blocks. And this is how Editor.js will work. So we're going to, right now, as you can see, start with an empty template. There is nothing pre-populated. If you would like, you could, for example, create a template, heading, and let's do like template. So we can create a template, and we could go to our editor, to our final content, and we could copy this JSON structure. And there is a lot of documentation you can read about that. And let's say every time we load, we want to greet the user with this wonderful template. Instead of having an empty array in the blocks, I would just paste this in here. Or I can set it as a variable if I want to do it even more elegant. And as you can see, I will just have this as the initial template loaded into the editor. And I can remove it, I can edit it, but every time I reload it, it will continue with the template. So this is one way to do it if you want to do it that way. So let's just remove it. Let's just start clear in here. And you can also set the template, for example, from the data you're going to do in an API call or whatever you want to do. But it's not recommended because there is actually a different function available in Editor.js called render data right up here. And it's a more elegant way of loading the Editor.js first without empty content. And the moment your API call finished or whatever happened, just loading the data gradually into it. That gives the user a better experience since the editor is already there and it is just waiting till the API call finishes until the data gets loaded into it, instead of forcing the editor not to be rendered and then just rendering it once the data is there. So that's a more elegant way of doing it. So, and then we have the onReady action or the onReady event. So if it is ready, we're just going to console log this and say Editor.js is ready. It's not needed. And then once it is ready, we're going to add some plugins into that. Because we can only add additional functionality onto the content in the editor if the editor itself exists, right? So once it was successfully rendered, once the editor was successfully configured into our Wized variable, we need to add the add-ons in there. Because they're external add-ons, they're not built by Editor.js, they're built by people I found on GitHub, and I don't know how responsible they are with their code base and all of that, so it's not really official. So we have to add them after it, because it is not a native thing that Editor.js accepts. So we are going to hack things together after Editor.js did its job. So this is how we're going to do that. So after the Editor.js was configured, we're going to create a new undo and a new drag and drop action within our Editor.js variable. So we created this Editor.js variable, this object, this instance, which already has all the configuration within it. And we're just going to take it and say, you know what? Let's just add this thing in here too. And this is exactly what we're going to do in this part for the undo and the drag and drop function. We're just going to reference this back to our editor. Oh, not the dictionary, to our Editor.js variable, which contains the editor itself, or at least the data. And then we have another action on change. So let me just show you how this works in practice. If I'm going to load the content in here, it will give me empty data, right? But the moment I'm going to add some text in here, or even the moment I'm going to add a heading in here, it is giving me the updated data, right? I see heading, data, text, hello. And if I'm going to do hello 123, you see it will say hello 123. And if I'm going to do hello Joe, it will say hello Joe. And if I'm going to do hello Leon, it will say hello Leon and Leon 123 and so on. So you get the idea. It is updating every time I update something on the canvas. And now it's giving me just like an empty thing. So it is giving me a JSON array of the data in the canvas so I can work with it, send it to the back end, reload it as a template on the next page load, and so on. So this is a super handy feature, and the way we're going to accomplish that is with the pre-built onChange event that Editor.js gives us. So we're just going to do v.editor.js, we're going to do .save, that's their function, and then after it was saved, so every time something changes on the editor, we're going to perform their save function. And once their save function, which just basically gets the data in the editor, and once it was successful, we're going to do the .then to get the output data. And once now we got the output data, we're going to console log that data, always do your console logs, and we are going to now set the v.json data, which is our variable here, representing the live data that is going on right now in the canvas, as the new input data that was made in the Editor.js. Because this variable, if we wouldn't have this code in here, this variable would not be synced with the data in the Editor.js. So think of it like this. If I were to remove this part, actually it's this part. If I were to remove this, and I would now start typing into the editor, I can type as much as I want, right? It will not add anything in here because we're not watching that if something changes on the canvas, that we appropriately update the variable, which makes it for us accessible in Wized. So we need to have this code to access the things that are going on within our Editor.js canvas. And the moment we add the function in here, as you can see, we start with a blank canvas, and I'm going to start typing in hello. We're going to get the data into an array, which we can use to store it at the back end or to re-render it and so on, or work with it or take it as an input or whatever. So this is needed to get the data in here. And if that doesn't work, we're just going to console log an error. You could just do another function in here. For example, you could just potentially reload a page. You could do a reload or something like this, but that is not needed. So let me just remove that. And yeah, this is the basic setup to create this Editor.js. You can turn it into a list, you can delete it and all of that. This is this setup. But now we have a second part into Editor.js, because most of the time, if I'm going to type, for example, hello in here and I turn it into a heading and I do a wonderful job, I want to save my progress. I don't want to lose anything, right? So we could now send this to a backend, and there will be a separate video coming for that. But now the important thing, and I think this should be covered in the basic videos, how do we load a template? Let's say I did something yesterday, or there is a template I want to start out with. How do I load this into the editor that's saying hello right now? Now that's a good question. I'm going to show you how that will work. So we have this button here, and the moment I click it, it will update the canvas and render new data into it. And there are more features. There is insert. You can add a new block. You can add a custom block. You could even add a YouTube video in there. There are so much things going on in their documentation, but we don't have time to cover everything in here today. So I'm just going to do the basic setup for the rendered data. So we have this function that will just render data in here. So as you can see, we start with a clear canvas. I click on here, it will pre-add a template. So in order to do that, we have a template. And this is exactly the data structure that Editor.js accepts. And now let's potentially say we wouldn't have that. You're just starting out with the clonable. The easiest thing you can do, let's actually modify the template a bit. Let's add another emoji here so it's a bit distinguishable. Let's add this emoji in here. Perfect. So I have this JSON data in here, right? And this JSON data now contains a template. Now, I cannot run it and get the data because then I would just clear everything out. So we have this final content in here, which will return the data in the Editor.js if data is available in the JSON data, and if not, it will just return any potential template we have. So let's just clear out the template. We don't have any template in here. And let's just reload everything. So we're starting out blank, and if I click on here, it's not going to add anything because we don't have a template. But we have it saved from the JSON data, which we get every time we type in here, like this. So I'm just going to go to my template variable, and I'm just going to paste it in here. And this is everything I just got from the JSON data, and we'll just paste it in as a template variable. And now if I'm going to load it in here, you will see that I have the template variable. And actually, I think I didn't copy it right because I used this emoji. So let's do this again. I'll have this emoji in here, and I have my final content. I'm going to click the plus. I forgot to copy that. That can happen sometimes. So I'll just copy that in here because it returns me the data that is right now within the canvas. And I will now just set the new template off here as the way I just configured that in the canvas. Of course, I have to format this a bit later on, but it will work. And now if I reload the canvas, I will add the data with this new updated template. Of course, now we don't have the breaks in here and all of that because I didn't have the time to style it. If you want to have like breaks in here, you just do an empty paragraph. That's the easiest way to work with that. But this is how you can prepare the data. Like when you add things in here, you get this preview in here. And we just have the variable that will, if there is data in here, it will return us the data from this variable, only the blocks. And if there's nothing in here, we just return a template, which may be an empty value, if it is. So let's just go a few steps back here, and let's just revert everything back as it was originally. And now I'm going to show you how we're going to load the data in here after we now have the template data or whatever data we want to render. This could come from your database. This could come from anywhere. This data template just serves as a template, as an example, basically. So we have this function or this action in here called render data. And let's just start with a clear canvas. So we have this button, add new text, and this is right in here. You can base it on an API call, on whatever you want. It is really modular. And we're just going to run the function const data to render, and we're just going to define blocks in here. So we're going to let blocks, we just do like blocks, and then we have v.template. So we let the blocks equal v.template because this is just containing the blocks we have. And now we're just going to run the function for v.editor.js, so referencing back the editor.js, which we configured in the Wized variable earlier. And we're going to do .render, that's their function. And then we're going to add in the function the data to render, which we defined in here for blocks. And then, after this was successful, we're going to fetch the response. This is a try and catch. And we're going to console log it. We're going to do content successful, replace successfully. And we're also going to reinitialize drag and drop, because since the initial setup or the initial data structure that will be now forcefully pushed into the editor.js changed, we need to reinitialize not the undo feature, at least not on my side here. We need to reinitialize the drag and drop feature, because otherwise it is still basing the drag and drop feature on the old canvas editing. It is not having this issue if I'm going to type something in here and type something in here, and I will successfully be able to drag and drop. But if the computer is forcing new data in it, it is not really having time to adapt to that with the drag and drop functionality. So that is why we need to reinitialize the drag and drop functionality in here the moment the new data was placed in here to not have any issues. And then we do a .catch. So if there is an error, we're just going to do a console log that there is an error, and we're going to get the error that editor.js that is loaded within the variable gave us. And this is the basic setup for editor.js. You can start with a blank editor, or you can add templates in here. And yeah, I have all my shortcuts. They're all pre-made. And I can type things in here. And I can do like this. I can add all my features. I can do the checklist and all of that. I can do check 1, 2, 3, and so on. So that is all the native functionality just by loading the editor. But now, if I say, okay, that's great, but I want to add a template in here or whatever, you can have them rendered from a database or something like this. I can just render new content into the canvas using the render function that now just comes from a template. And that is possible. That's the other functionality. So we have our template, which is just a JSON structure of content. This can come from your database, or it can come, for example, just from a template variable. But if you really want to work with a template, and you have the template before you want to initialize the editor.js, you could just add it in the template in here. And if not, if you say, I don't have the template, it's coming from an API call, you can use this render function, this code in here, and do it after API call finish. So after your request finishes, you're just going to perform this request to add the new data within the canvas, within the editor.js canvas, and you're not going to use v.template. You're probably going to use r for your request, r.example.data, for example, or .data.template, or something like this. So yeah, this is the example now of adding data into a preloaded canvas. So yeah, this is Editor.js. I hope that you're going to like it. I hope that you're going to build a lot of exciting and advanced applications within your Wized web app. Again, with Wized, as you can see, there are no limitations. You can easily build Notion within Wized. The sky is the limit with Wized, so it is a wonderful tool, and I'm excited to see all of the exciting stuff you're going to build with it. And thank you so much for all your support, for all your wonderful comments. It really means a lot and the whole world to me. I really appreciate that, and thank you so much for watching this video, for sharing the videos. Thank you so much for your time and your nice comments and your wonderful DMs on Discord. I really appreciate that, and thank you so much, and see you tomorrow. Bye bye.